Hey, what's going on everybody? It's your boy Blue. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about how to improve as a DPS, and this is going to go for any class. Basically, it's going to boil down to fully understanding the spec that you're playing and then executing that understanding. Now, I'm not going to be talking about any add-ons like rotation helpers or weak auras, anything like that. There is going to be one add-on that I'm going to mention, but it's not anything that's really going to be necessary or actually help you improve your damage. Now, with that being said, this video isn't just going to magically make you better. Alright, World of Warcraft, it's a really deep game, and it's going to take practice, it's going to take studying, it's going to take reaching to outside sources. So before we get into it, guys, I just want to remind you that leaving me a like on this video does help me out on the channel, and subscribing will help you to not miss out on any new content, which, by the way, at this point is going up about once every week. So without further delay, let's get right into it. Okay, first thing you're going to want to do, study your spells. I mean it. Read through every single one of your spells. I don't know how many times I've looked back over my spells and said, oh damn, I didn't know it did that too. Read through your spells. That means your talents, your passives, everything. And while you're doing that, you're gonna want to categorize them. Now for general purposes, I've categorized mine as follows: damage, defensive, debuffs, buffs, mobility, utility, and passives. Damage is obviously going to be anything that causes damage. This is going to be your spam spells, the ones that you're pressing all the time. Your cooldowns, the ones that are going to take forever to recharge. Your AoEs, otherwise known as area of effect. Your dots, otherwise known as damage over time. And then your builders and spenders. And I'll get into builders and spenders a little bit more once I get into the resource portion of the video. Next category is debuffs. Debuffs are anything that's going to have a negative impact on your opponent's performance. That means tranks and dispels, anything that's going to remove buffs from your enemy, anything that's going to increase your enemy's damage taken, reduce the damage they deal, reduce chance to hit, prevent stealth, etc. This is not an all-inclusive list. Like I said, debuffs have a negative impact on your opponent's performance, and if you're reading your abilities, you're gonna know when you see one. Next are buffs. Buffs have a positive impact on your performance. These can be anything from increasing haste, increasing your crit chance, increasing your dodge chance, increasing your movement speed, etc. Same thing, you're gonna know it when you see it. Next category I have is mobility. So for example, the Hunter's Disengage allows you to jump backwards a certain distance. The Soulshape ability that the Night Fae has, where you transform into a little fox and you're able to teleport. This is gonna include the Demon Hunter's Glide, the Monk's Roll, anything like that. Like I said, you're gonna know when you see it. It's anything that's gonna help you move around the map quicker and easier. And lastly, utility. Utility is a weird one because it's not necessarily gonna have a direct effect on you or your enemy, but they are going to give you a competitive advantage. For example, the Hunter's Flare allows me to shoot a flare into the sky and reveal invisible enemies. Also, another example, the Hunter's Feign Death basically allows you to play dead. Demon Hunters have Spectral Sight, which allows you to see basically enemies behind walls or invisible enemies or treasures in the world. Anything, they're utilities, but they're not necessarily going to buff you, debuff your enemy, or do any kind of damage. Lastly, we have passives. These are abilities that you don't have to click on, essentially. They're always running in the background, and these are usually on the last page of your spellbook. Now, I know there's a little bit of overlap in these categories, guys. I know that some defensive cooldowns are going to be buffs. I know that a buff increasing your movement speed could also be put in the mobility category. This layout I've put together is just to help you understand your class on a deeper level. Now, after you're done reading every single one of your spells, getting to know them, getting to understand them, you're going to want to take your key bindings seriously. Okay, 1 through equals is not going to cut it. If you have an MMO mouse with 12 side buttons, then great. If you want to invest in one, that's also great. But if you're like me and enjoy a classic 2 side button mouse, Bellular released a great video about key binding to your keyboard effectively, and I will link that in the description. But essentially, you want the closest keys to your hand to be used for your spells. So frequently used spells should be closest to WASD to reach them the easiest, and the least frequently casted spells should be farther away. Now I use QER, FG, XCV, 1, 2, 3, and 4 with shift modifiers for my second action bar and control modifiers for my third. This makes it super easy for me to click any one of my spells on any of the 3 action bars that I have. You know, I don't have to reach all the way over to the equals key in order to press a potentially important ability. Now here's where I'm going to talk about that add-on that I mentioned. You also might want to consider using OPI for utility spells to free up room on your action bars. OPI, basically what it does is you can keybind your abilities to these little rings that I'm showing you on the screen, and you can bind the rings to a single button. So for example, for me, all my mounts, if I click shift, middle mouse button, it's gonna bring this ring up and I can choose from any one of these mounts. If I don't click shift and I just click middle mouse button, it's gonna bring up all of my utility spells. This is gonna be my flare. This is gonna be my feign death. This is gonna be my misdirection. And I even have the Netomatic on here for world PvP. Point being is that there are creative ways to condense your key bindings in a more efficient way than basically just putting them on your number keys. And so as far as key bindings, you're also going to want to place your like spells close to each other, okay? Place your heals next to your heals. Put your AoEs with your AoEs. Put your dots with your dots, and so on. Or another option you could do is arrange your key bindings in the order of your rotation. So for me, what I do, I have all my dots on the left side, so I know that I can just apply all my damage over times to my enemies and then move forward with my rotation, which is going to be right next to those. Moving down the line is going to be my defensives, my heals, or my damage reduction spells for myself. And I put my disengage on R. This is just personal preference. I like to have a mobility spell close to WASD as well. But yeah, guys, take your key binding seriously. Once you know your spells, you're going to know where you're going to want to put them. Experiment with it. Okay, try different layouts out. I don't know how many times I've redone my key bindings, and I've honestly just become happy with the layout that I have now. Number 3 is knowing when to retreat. Guys, this one's super simple. You can't do damage if you're dead. This is equally important in both PvP and PvE. If you die in PvP, obviously you're gonna have to spawn back at the graveyard, and it could be up to 30 seconds until you're back into the battle, plus however long it takes you to run to the next fight. And you're seeing a huge loss in overall damage. In PvE, if you're doing a raid, if you're doing a dungeon and there's nobody to revive you during a boss fight, your team just lost a significant portion of their damage. Okay, you can't do damage if you're dead. Not dying is just as important as getting kills, if not more important, okay? Keep that in mind. Rule number 4 is do not cap on your resources. This rule is 99% accurate. There are few very specific instances where you want to cap on your resources, but you'll only understand those, or when those are, if you know your class front to back. And depending on the class, you might not even have this situation ever happen. So what does resource capping mean? If you're a super new player, your resources is basically your energy bar. Now it's called different things for different classes. For hunters, it's called focus. For mages, I think it's called mana. But it's basically your energy bar. Now depending also on what class you play, you might have two. For instance, feral druids and rogues, I believe as well. You'll have your regular energy meter, and then you're also going to have combo points. And Death Knights have a similar system built in as well with their runes. But point being is while you're in combat, you don't want to be maxed out on all your resources because basically it means that you're not being as efficient as you can be. If you're not casting at the same rate you're generating resources, then resources are being wasted. I hope that makes sense. I can be really bad at explaining things sometimes, but if you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment below and it will not go unnoticed. Number 5, play one class, one spec, okay? Until you feel like you have mastered it. Now, obviously, you probably won't have mastered it. There's going to be people that are better. There's going to be people that are insanely more experienced. But as a general rule, you don't want to be bouncing back and forth between survival hunter and then beast mastery and then marksmanship, and then you're going to jump over to your frost mage, and then you want to try a little bit of fire mage. I know that variety can be fun and exciting, but if you're jumping around to too many specs or too many classes, you're never going to fully understand even one of them. All right, like I said, I don't know how many times I went over my abilities and said, oh damn, I didn't realize this ability also did that, or dang, I didn't realize I had this passive, I need to change up my rotation. Stick with one until you know it front to back, plain and simple. If you want a simple way to improve, pick a spec, stick with it, okay? You'll know when it's time to change it up. You'll know when you feel experienced enough. You'll know. And it's funny because once you get one down, it's going to help you to understand the others. Not only if you have your key bindings in a logical spot, like I said previously, when you swap to another spec, you're going to be like, oh, okay, this ability is similar to that ability. I'm going to key bind it to the same spot. And that is going to immensely help with your skill transference from one spec to another, even one class to another. Okay, number 6, guys, researching talent builds. Like it or not, WoW is a game that requires you to pursue outside sources to improve. Experimenting in game is only going to get you so far. If your goal is to improve, which I'm sure it is if you clicked on this video, you'll need to look up talent builds for your spec for both PvE and PvP. Luckily, a website called Icy Veins has you covered. Linked below are complete PvE and PvP guides for every single spec in the game. Guys, use them to your advantage. For the love of God, I know it's fun to customize our characters and choose talents that make us feel like a unique member of the game, but at the end of the day, there's usually one best way to spec your talents for each scenario. And this is what it boils down to, guys. You gotta understand your class. You gotta take your key binding seriously. You have to practice, and you have to research. WoW is an insanely deep game. I mean, it's kind of crazy, actually. I mean, there are deeper games, but given that the majority of players out there are doing these things, you don't want to put yourself at a competitive disadvantage. In the end, there's not one thing that's going to make you a better player. There's not 2, 3, 4, 5 things that are going to make you a better player. With each spec and each class having at least 20 abilities, 20 spells, it boils down to you need to buckle up and you need to learn to understand it. And then, like I said, execute that understanding in an efficient way. Guys, if this video helped you out at all, please give it a like. And I know for a fact that exactly 94.4% of you guys aren't subscribed. Do me a favor, do yourself a favor, subscribe to the channel. I'm putting out videos like this every single week, and you don't want to miss them. Thanks for sticking around to the end, guys. Until the next video, I'm Blue Monkey, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.